I appreciate this opportunity to focus on the role of state securities regulators in the current economic crisis. Since the Securities Division is part of the Delaware AG's office, we have statutory jurisdiction over administrative, civil, and criminal actions to address securities fraud, and we do not have to refer our cases to an independent prosecutorial agency. This allows us more freedom to pursue offenders criminally, and we do not shy away from bringing criminal cases. Delaware was recently the first to indict a Ponzi scheme operator who was offering investments in fraudulent real estate deals. In another case, Delaware indicted a broker who had defrauded a senior citizen out of more than $200,000. The broker diverted funds from the client's account into a fictitious account. Shortly thereafter, the broker withdrew the money and left the country. Warrants are still outstanding, and we are attempting to secure his extradition to the U.S. In short, criminal prosecutions are an important tool for effective enforcement of federal and state securities laws. Delaware obtains cases in a number of ways. The primary source of securities cases comes from investor complaints about fraud and misconduct. We obtain cases from branch office examinations, referral from local law enforcement agencies, referral from other states, NASAA, the SEC, and FINRA. Mr. Chairman, as you noted during last year's ARS hearings, in a number of states, it has been the state securities officials and law enforcement officials that have taken the lead. High-profile national cases receive great public attention, but they should not obscure the more routine and much larger caseload representing the bulk of the state's enforcement work. Those are the cases which affect everyday citizens in their local communities across the country. During the past 3 months, the states have been very active. Washington, working with the FBI and IRS, broke up a $50 million oil and gas investment Ponzi scheme. Hawaii, with the assistance of the SEC and CFTC, shuttered a suspected Ponzi scheme targeting the deaf community in Hawaii, parts of the mainland, and Japan. An investigation by Texas resulted in a 6-year prison sentence for a Ponzi scheme operator who stole at least $2.6 million from investors. Arizona stopped the religious affinity fraud and ordered more than $11 million returned to investors. Since January, the Alabama Securities Commission has announced the conviction of 9 individuals convicted of securities fraud. These convictions encompass cases of fraud and abuse ranging from classic Ponzi schemes to violations of Reg D, Rule 506. All convictions and charges were felonies. Currently, Alabama has 27 defendants awaiting trial for securities fraud in 19 separate cases. During our most recent 3-year reporting period, state securities regulators have conducted more than 8,300 enforcement actions, which resulted in $178 million in monetary fines and penalties and more than $1.8 billion ordered returned to investors. We are responsible for the sending of fraudsters away for a total of more than 2,700 years in prison over the last 3 years. And yet, over a number of years, there's been a concerted industry effort against state regulation, which calls for the preemption of both state regulation and enforcement. For example, NASAA did preempt much of the state's regulatory authority for securities traded on national markets, and although it left state anti-fraud enforcement largely intact, it limited states' abilities to address fraud in its earliest stages before massive losses had been inflicted on investors. A prime example in this area is the private offerings under Rule 506 of Regulation D. These offerings enjoy an exemption from registration under federal securities laws, so they receive virtually no regulatory scrutiny. As a result, since the passage of NASAA, we have observed a steady and significant rise in the number of offerings made pursuant to Rule 506 that are later discovered to be fraudulent. Although Congress has referred the state's authority to take enforcement actions for fraud in the offer and sale of all covered securities, including Rule 506 offerings, the power is no substitute for the state's ability to scrutinize offerings for signs of potential abuse and to ensure disclosure is adequate before harm is done to investors. NASAA believes the time has come for Congress to reinstate state regulatory oversight over all Rule 506D offerings. There are a number of legislative proposals now pending to significantly increase funding for federal law enforcement agencies. NASAA supports these efforts, but urges Congress to consider establishing federal grant programs to assist state agencies, including securities divisions, involved in the prevention, investigation, and prosecution of certain financial crimes. State securities regulators have learned how to do more with less. However, there is little doubt that additional resources during this economic downturn would help prosecute these cases, which have resulted in vulnerable investors looking to recover their losses. State securities regulators welcome the opportunity to work with our regulatory partners at the SEC and the SROs to collectively use our resources to protect investors. To facilitate communication and coordination of all financial service issues, NASAA believes the President's Working Group should be expanded to include representatives from the state agencies that regulate banking, insurance, and securities. Another improvement would be more consistent cooperation between states and their regional counterparts at the SEC. In conclusion, state securities regulators are dedicated to pursuing those firms and individuals who have violated the securities law. We want to ensure that we not only maintain but enhance our authority to regulate at the local level and bring enforcement actions with appropriate remedies against those firms that violate securities laws in their jurisdictions. With additional resources and support from Congress, state securities regulators will continue to provide an indispensable layer of protection to Main Street investors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.